Right, we're now live streaming.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Policy and Finance Committee meeting of Beverley Town Council on Monday, the 11th of October 2021. If I could just pass over to the clerk to explain why we are meeting remotely, please.
As we explained at the start of every meeting, the government didn't continue in the Emergency Coronavirus Act the ability for councils to make decisions lawfully remotely. Therefore, still being cautious and due to our limited space, this council resolved, when it still could make resolutions remotely, for all delegated powers to go to the town clerk or acting town clerk. In essence, the recommendations made at these meetings will direct the actions that I take. It's a recommendation rather than a resolution. If there's any items that we feel need a full official resolution of councillors, they will go to full council, which we are now meeting in person at the Amaze Room at Beverley Minster Parish Hall. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we move to making a roll call of the members present. I have representing officers. I have the acting town clerk, Matt Snowden, and the admin officer, Libby Woodhouse. Present, I see Councillor Peter Astell, Councillor Anne Willis, Councillor Duncan Jack, Councillor Dennis Healy, Councillor Chloe Hopkins, and myself, Councillor Linda Johnson, in the chair. Welcome to anybody who may be watching this on YouTube. Apologies for absence, Matt.
Councillor Thomas Still.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations. To record declarations of interest by any member of the council in respect of the agenda items listed below. Members declaring interest should identify the agenda item and type of interest being declared. Do we have any declarations? I see nobody waving at me, so we'll take that as read. There are no declarations. 3B, to note dispensations given to any member of the council in respect of agenda items below. Are there any dispensations? Anne, are you doing your hair or are you waving at me? Fantastic, thank you very much. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is to note the minutes of the Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on Monday, the 6th of September, which have been previously circulated and approved and signed at full council on Monday, the 20th of September 2021.
I just need to note, Madam Chair, we don't need a proposal or a second.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Matt. Agenda item 5A, to review current account payments made between the 1st of September 2021 and the 30th of September 2021. Are there any queries? Yes, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I already raised this with the town clerk, but just for any members of the public who may want to watch this back, just to query the situation with the Gmail storage now that we've upgraded our IT, please.
Yeah, that's on the
credit card.
Yes, it is correct.
So we're at the moment on the current.
Oh, sorry, I've got that down as 5A.
Not a problem, it's good.
No, you're correct. It is 5B. This is just the system that I'm using to have a look at my things. My apologies.
Not a problem. I'll bring you back in literally in 2 minutes. Are there any queries with regard to the current account? I'd like to mention the fact that the Timpson's key cutting is for our new, well, Matt, were you going to comment on the key cutting?
I was going to comment on that one other. The key cutting, that was to enable Natalie, who's engaged to organise the Jubilee event, access to the building, because she'll be in every Wednesday mid-morning till afternoon or later. Councillors are welcome at any point to contact her to drop in. We also cut a couple of extra garage keys, one that I've kept on my keychain, so I'm not, of course, going to come back and forth to find the key, and another to go to, we're given to JB Rural, so when they come to collect things, they can have direct access to the garage, and we don't have to leave things in the grit bin anymore. We can leave them in the garage where they're a lot safer for them to collect. And the final item on that.
Tell the world our secret storage place, don't you?
The secret storage, where there's nothing secreted there anymore except grit. And PFK Little John's, the last item. because we're still going through the issue where we've responded to the inquiries from a member of the public, they haven't charged us yet for the 2019-20 external audit, but they have charged us for the 2020-21. So we have paid last year's now, but we're still waiting for the bill for the years before, which hopefully will be clarified in the next couple of weeks. Now they have all the information they require. So it's just a bit of a backwards way they've sent their invoices for that. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm hoping this is Councillor David Horsley, who has joined the meeting. So welcome to David. We can't actually see you, but hopefully you can hear us, David. Thank you. Any of the queries with regard to the current account payments? Everybody happy? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5B, Councillor Hopkins.
Sorry about that. That's just the way I had this formatted on here to look at it. Yeah, it's just a query that we're currently still paying on the credit card for the Google Mail storage. But obviously, since we as a council have upgraded, I did ask the clerk about this earlier, but I thought just for any members of the public that are interested.
Yeah, we're waiting for Hallbeck, our IT support company, to cancel those for us. I've emailed Carol this afternoon as to, for any members of the public, Carol's our finance officer, if tomorrow she can give them a nudge to remind them of that tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Is everybody happy? I see lots of nods. Agreement on that. All happy to approve the credit card statement. Yep, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on to agenda item 6, which is a review of the internal audit recommendations action plan. I'm going to hand it straight over to Matt for this. I was pleased to see there's lots and lots of green on it, Matt.
Of the 37 points, we've now completed 25. There's 12 that are in orange, which are ongoing. Now, some of those, they're not bad things, the fact that they're still ongoing. Some of them, for example, are connected with when we actually set the budget, so we can't complete it yet until we've done the process of the budget. Some of these recommendations might never technically be completed because it's an ongoing process of how we do something in a different way. You'll know that, for example, number 14, we're still trying to get quotes back from HR companies to provide the same sort of service that our IT company provides us with throughout the year, to provide the same sort of service in terms of HR, but they're not being terribly forthcoming. So Carol is rather doggedly chasing them to get some quotes for the next personnel meeting, and that connects with 2 of those. Item 17 is something that we're struggling with as well, because the recommendation was to change the names on the credit card and debit card, but the bank have told us we can't do that because they're in the name of the clerk who is absent due to illness. We can't progress that without so various things on here are ongoing still. Some will be completed in the near future, but I'm pleased to report that there's nothing that's not been looked at. We've completed the vast majority, 25 out of the 37, and when we have the next internal audit, I think myself and my colleagues will be really pleased to show the progress we've made regarding these.
Lots of nods. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to put it on record that we have most grateful for the hard work that you, Matt, and Libby and Carol have put into ensuring we are brought up to speed, and that to have achieved 25 out of the 37 in such a short period of time is fantastic, and just shows the diligence and the work that's gone into doing this. So thank you very much indeed. And I think it would be good to have another update on this in perhaps 3 months' time, if you're happy to do that. And then we know where we are. Could I just ask though, have there been any recent inquiries from members of the public with regard to our financial situation at all?
No, nothing since the stuff we're dealing with Little John's, but nothing directly to the council. That's
excellent news. Are there any queries? Yes, Councillor Astell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo what you just said. and especially looking back during the pandemic, when members of staff were working from home, it was very, very difficult. And I think our members of staff are a credit to the town council with what they've done. And it just goes to show that with that little bit of effort and support from members that we have, which appears to look like we've got our house in order. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Astell. Councillor Healy.
Thank you. I would echo that, of course. Thank you to the team for great work. Matt, obviously when we have the next internal audit, presumably you're going to go, this document will be a key part of your discussions with the internal auditor, who obviously raised all these issues, and presumably you're going to be using this document as the basis for discussions for the next internal audit. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it'll be there in a gilded frame.
Absolutely, on the wall, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, what we've got here now is a working document that addresses the concerns that were legitimately raised, and the actions that have been put in place to deal with that. At one point, Matt, there's 37 points on here. I thought there was 32 points on the original action plan.
There was on the action plan from the interim inspection. Then when the auditor came back a few weeks later to do the final, there were about 5 or 6 additional ones. So in total, it was 37 with those additional ones.
Okay. And this is obviously a great document that can be used in future as well with members of the public or anyone who's interested in seeing how we are addressing the issues that came up at the audit. So that's a great document to have, and well done for bringing us to this point, and well done to Libby and Carol as well for all their input.
Thank you. I think it's worth adding that on some of the items were recommendations, and we've not followed them precisely. So, for example, the recommendation that we get a stamp that goes on all the invoices. We've gone alternative route with a piece of paper that documents where everyone signs. It performs the same function, but actually we feel gives increased clarity. But without that initial recommendation, we may not have thought of putting something in place. So a lot of the recommendations are to fit in with how we're doing things. But more or less, we've followed everything to what's been said because they were logical, or we've been able to develop it in a way that we're sure that will meet approval.
Thank you. Any other queries? We're all happy to move on from item 6. I think it's number 36 that will lead us into agenda item 7, Matt, unallocated reserves.
Yes, we don't actually have a policy on that, but it's something that I'll produce for the next policy and finance meeting, because that was one of the recommendations, but we wanted to get the reserve sorted because that was essential. So in item 7, Madam Chair, if I could ask if councillors will let me share the document, because I've done one revision to it since it was sent out. I'll go through each point and then I'll stop the sharing so the chair can see everybody's faces and anyone can ask questions or make any other revisions and suggestions.
Great idea. I think we've lost Councillor Horsley again. Have we?
Yeah, I think it might be his internet connection.
Oh dear. Hopefully he can come back in. Yes, please continue sharing.
All right, hopefully you can all see that. So the initial thing that we're trying to resolve is the fact that there are £45,598 that are unallocated, and we need to make sure that everything has an allocated purpose or project. Already, through the past few weeks, 500 has been allocated to the website for the purchase of the online finance system, so people can electronically make payments to us, which I'm in the process of setting up. And we also need to buy dog waste bags, because whilst the receptacles had been purchased, the dispensers, there wasn't actually budget to purchase. So we bought 30,000 bags because they emptied very quickly. Everything else on this sheet is showing how, as officers, we've looked at the projected spend of how things are going and where more was spent last year or less was spent last year, and where we think we need to allocate the unallocated reserves to make sure that the budget lines are complete throughout the year. We don't go into any situation where we have to find money that we don't have. So dog waste bags 2. We spent that £1,000, £1,044 on 30,000 dog waste bags. We don't know at this point in time how long they'll last. So we're suggesting allocating £6,000. That's roughly £1,000 a month for the rest of the financial year, in case we need that many per month. If, however, by, for example, January, we're not using anywhere near that amount, this can be brought back to this committee and we can say, well, now we see the projections, we'll need £2,000 rather than £6,000, which would mean there's a surplus £4,000, which this committee can then allocate to something else. I think the key to all this is on a meeting or by meeting basis, reviewing the spend, reviewing the reserves and seeing where money can be moved to a different line that perhaps needs a bit more, another needs a bit less. So we're constantly reviewing where our funding is best used, or where it can be vied, rather than waiting several months and then suddenly having a lot to deal with. So if we deal with it more on an almost meeting basis, we'll be able to keep a better idea. So while £6,000 might seem a lot, and it probably is, but we can't guarantee it is too much, by January we'll have a better idea where some of that 6,000 could be allocated to another budget line, but at present that could be what we actually need. We don't know yet, but it's to belt and brace the situation. Staff salaries. We're currently in the situation where the acting, well, I'm the acting town clerk, and the town clerk is still off ill. When and if Helen returns, the town clerk returns, there may be an issue of phased return, meaning that I'm still stepping up as acting clerk, but she could be back on full pay before I go back down to deputy clerk level. So we needed to account for that because it wasn't previously budgeted for. Again, it might not be used, but it's better that it's allocated in there if required. Sorry, it keeps moving quicker than I expect. Okay, let's try it. Right. Legal fees. I know Councillor Johnson can confirm that when she attended some finance training for councils, one of the bits of advice was that all councils should have a relatively decent legal pot available to them, rather than always expected to rely on earned liquor. I think that's right, isn't it, Councillor Johnson? And we have allocated some, but we felt it would be prudent to allocate more. This is the first year we've actually had a dedicated budget for this as such. In the year before, money was taken from reserves. So again, it might be too much, but it's there to cover all possibilities, and we can review it later on. With the flowers, we're suggesting £2,000 in there. That is for the hanging baskets, planters, barrier planters, barrel planters, etc. around town, not just in the town centre, but out on Cherry Tree, Swarmer Estate, out on Model Farm Estate. The town council is doing more this year in terms of the winter planting, which I don't know if anyone's seen, but it looks absolutely fantastic. I still have to nudge Plantscape to come and remove the hanging baskets that are in town and the three-tiered planters. Once the hanging baskets are taken away, our contractor will bring in more new hanging baskets that have already been planted up for winter. So again, that's to cushion that, because it's something the town council wants to do extra special this year. Election expenses. Every year we allocate X amount for the election at the end of the 4 years, start of the next council. However, because there's been 3 unexpected by-elections, of which we still haven't received the invoices all from East Riding, usually we get those at the very end of the financial year, we have to replenish that pot to ensure that there's enough available at the end of this council term to pay for the next set of full local council polls. So that £8,000 will replenish that pot rather than suddenly having to find it close to the date. £4,000 match funding. This was the amount left over from what we've just seen and what I'll come on to. Other councils do keep a match funding pot. So whilst it's not there for a particular project, it's allocated for a purpose. So if we wanted to secure funding for a new project, but we need match funding for it, we would use money from that budget line. So while, as I say, it's legitimate because it's for a purpose, but it's not for a particular project. And that might be useful going forwards when we're looking at other projects where we may be able to secure match funding. Councillors may remember that a few months ago, the council agreed, rather than one of our funding partnerships, to go into a practical partnership, a joint project with the civic society and other organisations, but mainly the civic society, to mark the 1,300 years since the death of St John, with planting 13,000 trees. 1,300. We'd like 13,000 as well. 1,300 trees. That's come up quite quickly. And so, for example, we're a partner in it, and in the immediacy to Linda, can you remind me of the technical ecclesiastical term for the 25th of October?
Yes, it's St John's Translation Day. It's when his remains were removed from wherever they were originally buried into the Minster and were buried in the Minster.
To commemorate that, it was hoped that we'd be able to plant an oak tree in the grounds of the Minster, but we're not allowed to plant anything in the grounds of the Minster. So it's the idea of getting a tree in a pot with a plaque of commemoration, which would be placed there as a joint thing between ourselves and the Civic Society. That £554 would cover that project because we are a partner in it, and it would also enable some flexibility as well for other future work of that project which we've committed. The Jubilee, we've already got, I think it's roughly £19,700 allocated for the Jubilee. That £5,000 would take it to roughly £25,000. We know the project's going to cost between £45,000 and £50,000. So it means this year we will have allocated half that budget. Therefore, the next year's budget and precept will encompass the other half. Town entry signs, we budgeted £6,000 for this. That majority of that would go on the materials and the installing of them. At last full council, councillors decided that they would like a more creative design, so therefore there's higher costs related to that. I was bringing something back to the next full council meeting, but to cushion that, I'm advising a total of £10,000 by allocating a further £4,000. But again, if it comes in at less, we can reallocate any remaining. New telephone system, we've agreed that we need a new telephone system, but we've put no budget aside for it. That might be too much, it might be too little, but £2,000 is a good figure to look at a new integrated telephone system. It's something that I'll be looking at over winter. Now companies are more coming out to organisations. So because our current telephone system isn't really up to scratch, but we do need a VP, whatever it is, technical term, telephone system, to make it more flexible, to give us more remote access and to enable us to use it more efficiently. Again, we can reallocate if required. The flagpoles, this was a project the town council agreed on over a year ago for two, not the flagpoles like the Pride flags, but two freestanding flagpoles, one in Jubilee Gardens and one in Hengate Gardens. The council agreed it and agreed £1,500, but it wasn't actually detailed in the allocated reserves, so we've allocated it here. Therefore, in total, all of that, what's already been allocated and our recommendations make 45,598. That would mean that all our finances are allocated. The idea that we've got tens and hundreds of £1,000s floating around that we're not doing anything with isn't true. For example, we have now, as you will have seen in the payments, the £350,000, which we have allocated ring fence to purchase property, has now been deposited with CCLA to ensure that it's safe, it's with a separate organisation, and it will accrue interest as well. And it's also easy for us to access should a property become available. overall, I think this illustrates that we are taking into consideration our finances. The general reserves, those general running costs, should they be required, that were reduced from 9 months worth to 6 months worth. That money has been allocated, the money that released has been allocated to the skate park. Being our skate park fund now has £71,000 in. When we set the budget, we will be proposing that 6 month thing goes down to 3 months. So we gradually fulfilled the requirements of the internal auditor. I think it is important to mention that now, because a lot of this year's budget came from reserves. So the Christmas lights, the planting, the flowers, etc., all came from reserves. Those reserves won't be there next year. So when we're setting the budget, council has to consider it may rise, or it may have to raise the precept, or other elements in the budget may have to be cut down to afford that. That's a slightly different discussion, but councils need to be aware that there is no longer a pot of money that can be used like that when the budget is put together. But these proposals do ensure that everything goes to allocated purposes that the council has already agreed on. However, it's up to councillors to, if they want any changes to that, we can do that, but that's our recommendations. And I will shut up now, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Food for thought, literally. So Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's really thorough going over. I think in general, that's a really good set of recommendations. I was just wondering if it'd be possible before we do the budget setting for us to kind of have the budget with those new allocations included for us to have a look at for the purposes of us budget setting. Also, I just note, I think with the scrolling, you just skipped the Beverley Beck project.
Oh, sorry, yeah, there's the Beverley Beck projects as well. That's £1,500 that, again, the town council had agreed to match fund to the commuted sums, but wasn't listed in the reserves. Regarding the budget, what myself, Carol and Libby are going to do over the next couple of weeks is put together a budget for next year based on what we know we're spending now and what we know the council wants to do next year, to then put before this committee and councillors for any new ideas and to consider further. So yeah, it'll definitely be part of that. All our full list of reserves, ring-fenced reserves, will be factored into that, and so all of that stuff will be clearer. And we hope to draw some of the budget lines apart a bit so things are clearer. The example I keep giving is, as I've discussed with Councillor Estelle, with PE planning, environmental services, litter bins and grit bins. That's just one budget line, and the majority of that goes on filling the grit bins. So break it down: new grit bins, one budget line; new litter bins, one budget line; and grit bin and litter bin maintenance as a third budget line, to make things clearer. And that'll help myself, Karen and Libby, pull together a proper working budget that we can then put before councillors in the way that Councillor Hopkins talked about.
That's excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Any other comments? I'd like to ask a question, please, mainly about the doggy poo bags. To be spending £6,000 seems to be an extortionate amount of money on dog waste bags. Can I ask you about the nature of these dog waste bags? 30,000 for 1,044 makes it sound as if you're buying gold-plated, elasticated, it seems to be really expensive. What are the nature of these poo bags?
They are black bags for depositing the aforementioned that are biodegradable. That's the cost of that quantity. As I said, it may be nowhere near the 6,000, but as we know, that's how much this batch cost. I'm optimistically predicting that by January we'll be able to reduce that budget line considerably. We just didn't want to get into the situation where it ends up costing that much every month. We don't have the money allocated for it. I'm hoping that by January we'll be able to say we've now got £4,000 or more that we know we can allocate to another budget line. We can look at getting sourcing cheaper bags. I think the reason we purchased the ones that we did is because they come from the company that we got the dispensers from, so we know they fit, and because the dispensers, when they were installed, were all filled, they emptied a lot quicker than we expected. So we had to get them very, very quickly because of the number of phone calls from members of the public reporting and complaining about empty dispensers. So hopefully it'll be better news in January when we can reassess the amounts. But if it does cost that much, the council will have to consider going forwards. If it does come to the tune of £1,000 a month or even £500 a month, that has to be budgeted in for 12 months worth. But because they've only been up for a month or two, we've still got to assess the usage to quantify that properly.
And that's why they're biodegradable. I mean, this is toxic waste that goes straight to be burnt. So biodegradable, they're never going to go to landfill. They're always going to be burnt. So why do they need to be biodegradable?
They don't. I wasn't aware at the time of what happened with waste from these riding bins, because unlike other places in the country, if no one's aware, where you get the red dog waste bins, dog waste can go in any public litter bin. I wasn't aware of what happened to the things once they get put in the bins. So we can look at sourcing more inexpensive bags in the future now that we know that they do not have to be biodegradable.
I mean, to be fair, this has been a great project, and it's okay. There's always somebody who complains about it, but we've got a lot of positive publicity from this, I think, and showing that we're being a responsible council in giving this a go. So credit to the PES committee who suggested this. Councillor Hopkins, I think you waved at me, did you? No?
It was just a query about the same thing as you asked, Councillor Johnson, so it's been covered.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from anybody? Councillor Healy.
Interesting fact, we're spending £1 for every dog in Beverley. So Beverley dogs are well looked after and catered for. But I agree, it's been a worthwhile project. One of the things I wanted to just ask, Matt, what's been the sort of reaction? I mean, in terms of when you put these bags in, are they staying in? Are they being used? Or are we having any examples of theft of dog bags? I mean, people think, well, I can nick a few dog bags from dispensers. Is that happening, or are they all being used properly, as far as you know?
As far as we know, it's all right. We 2 weeks ago, the maintenance contractor who works for JB Rural that we engage filled them all up, but that takes quite a lot of time. So now we do it on a case-by-case basis. So, for example, a gentleman called today to say the one at the top of Norwood or of Grove Park was empty. Now, that kind of makes sense that one would be empty because it's next to a little open park where lots of people dog walk naturally. So every time we get one through now, we'll text message him and he'll go and do that specific one. We've had no real reports so far. We had one gentleman concerned that they were being pulled out, but that was just after they'd been put in, so maybe they were a novelty and that's been refilled. We've not had any reports of them becoming incredibly empty very quickly or them causing an issue. But it's still early days. It could go either way, but presently we're doing it on a case-by-case basis when they get empty, and we seem to be keeping up with it.
Councillor Hopkins.
I have to say, I cycle past them, and I have seen like regular use by dog walkers, like multiple dog walkers, even when I'm doing one cycle journey. So it looks to me like it's just they're being used for the purpose that they're intended for. And if people are taking a couple, I think we can kind of hope that they're still being used for the purpose intended for. Obviously, if somebody's starting to take out all of them at once, then we've got concerns. But certainly in terms of what I've witnessed of use.
Do you think, Chloe, I mean, obviously you've seen them doing it. Do you think that people, who otherwise would have, when I got our dog, I always make sure I've got poo bags with me. Do you think that people are saying, well, actually, I can save money. I don't need to go and buy poo bags now because I can get them from these dispensers. I wonder to what extent that's happening. I mean, it's just an interesting thought that we just sort of saving people money on the Tesco bills. You know,
I mean, it's possible, but to be honest, in my personal view, given every other cost that people in Beverley are facing, that's not 100% a bad problem. You know, if we can help alleviate some of the in some small way. But also, I think, to be honest, most dog walkers I know, it's a case of that's quite handy as you're going past. And then if you also have your own bag for when you're perhaps going a bit of a further walk and you're not right by something where you can get something from a dispenser. But also just in terms of our role as a council in trying to ensure that Beverley streets are clean and tidy, anything we can do to discourage littering is a positive for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Thanks, Chloe.
And dogs bring a great amount of pleasure to a lot of people. So yeah, I think this is one of those nice projects to do, isn't it? Just as positive as the flowers. I'm going to need a proposer and a seconder for Matt's allocation of remaining unallocated reserves. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Healy, can we just take a vote? Yeah, I think we're all in favour. We are quorate, aren't we? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Estelle. We are quorate, aren't we? Yes, thank you very much indeed. So that's carried. Thank you very much for your hard work on that. And thank you also for the allocation so that we can commemorate St John, which sadly we haven't been able to do this year, but without St John and Beverley, Beverley would not be here, and we certainly wouldn't be here as town councillors. So yes, you can drink to St John, Chloe. Thank you very much. Let's move on to item 8, which is an honorary freeman, free woman policy, because we haven't had one before. So I'll hand over to Matt, who is an honorary freeman.
Yeah, we have some really good notes from when Helen, when the town council initially got Helen to look into this, to bring this in. There's some really good notes, but they were never actually formalised as a policy. We sent, I looked back at past minutes from last year, and I've sent the notes out which say what we can do, but don't give the definitive answer that this is what we do. So I've reformatted it and added a couple more things. So we have this formal policy, different to the Good Neighbour Awards, because the honorary freeman is the highest honour that the town council can bestow. So the council has to really consider who they would like to take on bestow the honours to. The only real things that I've made clear in it that were different, that weren't previously, are that there can be any number of freemen and free women at any one time, but to give some sort of control to it, that the maximum total of freemen or freemen bestowed per municipal year be 2. Now, that doesn't mean the council has to even bestow every year. It might be that the council doesn't have anybody in mind. So it's not a compulsory thing the council has to do. The way that we manage it is at the November meeting of full council, it is immediately followed that evening with an extraordinary meeting to discuss honorary freemen and free women, of which the first agenda item is to exclude members of the public. I'm going to look into this. I'm going to contact Ernlicher to see whether we can do it by having it as the last agenda item on the full council meeting rather than an extraordinary meeting. And that will dictate a small part of this policy, which I'll revise for full council. But other than that, I think it gives council the criteria for eligibility, the historic framework as to why they're there, the entitlements, and just keeps it focused. So when councillors are considering making honorary freeman and free woman, there's a guidance document there.
Councillor Hopkins.
This is really clear and helpful. I actually just had a query for the town clerk, if I may, which is obviously nominations have to be made by Beverley town councillors. But is there any way that we can solicit recommendations to councillors? Because of course, you know, we're all embedded in Beverley in different ways, but it's not possible for each of us to know every person that's contributing in some way to the town. And of course, this is about trying to find something extraordinary, but there might be something that perhaps members of the, people of the town think is worth commemorating, that we haven't considered or that we haven't thought of. And it'd be worth having something, maybe groups that we would ask if they have any ideas, or some way of saying, we would like you to tell us. Obviously, we have that for the good neighbour ones, just whether or not there's some way we could do this for this as well.
Well, we've never actually had it before for the good neighbours. It's more been the council and particularly the mayor who has decided on the good neighbours as part of the privileges of their year. But I think that the way this year's worked with the nominations and the engagement has been really nice. And it could be something that council considers doing in the future. And it might be rather than soliciting Freeman, it could be through the Good Neighbour Award, someone gets put forward that has maybe done more and more that could then be almost elevated, as it were. I think part of it is again the responsibility of councillors as councillors, who knowing the town and talking to people and talking to groups. We can look at it in various ways. It could be a nomination thing for the members of the public, but as this is the highest honour that the town council is allowed to bestow, I think it's incumbent on the town councillors to really have their antennae out there. But it could be that in the future that we do officiate the Good Neighbour Awards as something that is more open to the community. That we piloted it this year, which whilst we didn't get a huge number, it was the first time, limited local press, difficult circumstances still, and it just seemed a nice thing to do.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Just a small point, Matt, on nomination procedures A, its nominations can be made by any Beverley Town Council.
Yep, I've already revised that in the on my computer. So, yeah, I meant to say that. That was one of the errors. Yeah.
The main point I was going to make was on E, that this requires no less than 2/3 of the members of the council. What's the precedent for that? Because I know of no other standing order that says it has to be a 2/3 majority. What's the reason for that, and why is it not a simple majority? And
I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure. That's what was in the notes that council have followed. So what I could do is, if council want, I could check that out. It might be some sort of requirement regarding the bestowment of an honour like this, but I can get that checked out. And if councillors would like, I could revise that to a simple majority when the policy comes.
Well, I think that's worthy of discussion here, because obviously you're suggesting this is a draft which we're going to put forward. I mean, my own personal view is obviously people may have different opinions. Is that it should be a simple majority, really, because unless there's some compelling reason. But I know that it does confuse things a little bit when you have a 2/3 majority. We did have this last year actually over that, but anyway, others may have different views. Chloe's got a hand up.
Chloe.
If I may, I think I'd just disagree with you on it, Dennis, just because, as Matt says, it's supposed to be the highest honour we can bestow. I think it's quite important to have not just a simple majority, but a super majority of the council in favour of it, because then it really is sort of an endorsement from the as much of the council as possible. I think that kind of recognises how important it is as something that we can offer and as a recognition.
Councillor Astell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as being one of the founder members of introducing this originally, I cannot recall it's ever been to have 2/3 majority. I always thought that it was a simple majority. I don't know where that has come from, but Matt's right. He can look at it, but I think it's down to this council what we decide, whether it's a simple majority or whether it's a 2/3 majority.
If I could just answer Councillor Estelle, I think that highlights the importance of it being a policy, rather because that's in the notes that all councils got, but the notes are different to a policy. So what council Stell's raised highlights the importance of it being formalised.
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Willis. You're on mute. Those famous words. You're on mute.
It'd be an idea if you could hear me, wouldn't it? Sorry. I'm backing Chloe because I think to make it absolutely clear that that person is wanted by most of the council is better than it just sneaking by with one. Does that sound a bit odd? But do you know what I mean? It's we want it to be an endorsement by most of the council, and to have the 2/3, I think, is safer than just saying a majority. But that's my opinion.
Anybody else want to comment? Councillor Jack, Councillor Horsley, would you like to comment? No, Councillor Horsley. Yeah.
Well, I certainly agree with the 2/3 view. I think that there are people who are very popular with a certain sector of the public and very unpopular with another sector. And that may be for good reasons and not merely a prejudice.
Thank you. Councillor Jack, you don't want to comment? No, you're happy either way. Okay,
It is important, I agree. And in fact, last year it did come into play, without mentioning any particular individuals. The 2/3 rule, as a result of the 2/3 rule, an individual was chosen. Had it been a simple majority, it would have been, sorry, was not chosen. Had it been a simple majority, that person would have been chosen. So it is a pertinent thing. I mean, personally, I think it's down to individual councillors, and I hear the arguments for 2/3. I'm not going to get too excited either way. I just think it's a little bit inconsistent, and that's something worthy of consideration. Matt's going to come back, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, Madam Chair, that you could agree on the you could agree in principle to the policy on the provision that item E, 6, I need to number that as well, that should be 4E. I'll find out whether there's any specific reasons why it's detailed as 2/3 from Earnlicker, and then we can finalise that decision on that item of the policy at full council, because the policy will be on full council in its own right for final approval. So you could approve the rest of the document with the exception of E to be reconsidered following advice.
Can I just ask you a question about that, Matt? Because if it's going to be decided by full council in November, that same evening you have got the extraordinary meeting. So are we saying that we'll make a decision at full council and then that policy will be effective from that moment, and that extraordinary meeting will consider it? It'll
be full council in October, the 25th of October.
Oh, I see. So right, okay. So it would be whatever the decision is, then it would be effective for the
November meeting. Yeah.
November. I mean, I agree. It should be considered by full council. It's not really. There's only a few of us from the full council here, so I think it's something that the others should have a say in. All of us should have a say in it. But really, policy change it should be. Yeah.
It is interesting. This so there's 7 of us here. Shall we just take a straw poll as to what we think, as to whether we think it should be a 2/3 majority, bearing in mind that at the last nominations, one person was voted through unanimously by everybody, and then one person fell foul of the 2/3 rule. But it'd just be interesting to see what everybody thinks. So those in favour of a simple majority, would you like to show? And you can abstain if you want to. So that's 2. Those in favour of a 2/3 majority, that does include me. And those who really don't care. Sorry, abstentions.
It isn't that I don't care.
You just
I
have
just
to
want to think a bit longer about it before I make my mind up.
yeah,
Right.
very well.
That's the top and bottom of it.
That's a fair comment. Yeah. Yeah. It is an interesting one, isn't it? Very interesting. And Matt, if you could do some research on that would be great. But apart from that, what do we think of this policy? My view is that I'd be happy to see policies for everything if it makes life clearer for everybody concerned. And then we don't have these grey areas because we've got a policy that's been voted through by full council. Yes, Councillor Horsley.
I think that it's a good idea to have a policy. I would rather like to see something in it actually saying that the choice of a honorary freeman should be an out of ordinary choice. In other words, the choice should not be made in every year.
You're suggesting that we shouldn't have freemen every year?
Yes.
I'm
not. I see that it's very difficult to settle a policy of that kind.
But I'm sure somewhere it says in here that there doesn't need to be an award every year.
It does say that.
There can only be a maximum of 2.
Yes.
Does that kind of cover your reservation?
Well, it's not just what the policy says, it's what we in practice do that makes the difference. And I would hate to see us getting 2 extra honorary freemen every year.
Yeah, if I could, Madam Chair, I did say that earlier, that the council does not have to, but it doesn't actually state it in the policy. So I said in practice the council don't have to select every year. So I could add a line about that to clarify that position.
And do we think there should be a maximum number of free men or free women at any one time? I mean, I know this policy says that there doesn't need to be a number, but perhaps there ought to be. If we are thinking about exceptional people, then perhaps we should make sure that we are only filling those spots with truly exceptional people. Chloe.
Just a few points, Madam Chair. Firstly, I think 3H, where it says rather than a compulsory annual obligation, we could firm that up a bit to make it very clear that although this might be reviewed every year, there's no obligation on the council to actually make an award, and that it really is about extraordinary contribution. But then on that point, I want to say that we are somewhat living in extraordinary times, and extraordinary times can give rise to a lot more extraordinary people or people doing extraordinary things. And I wouldn't want to limit that based on some sort of artificial number. It really should be about the contribution. You know, if it turned out that during at one time we've had, 3 years where we have actually awarded two positions in each of those 3 years, I don't think there should be something limiting that if those people have genuinely made those kind of contributions. The key, I think, to make sure that we're making the recognition is to stress that point that Councillor Horsley said about it can be reviewed every year for if we want to make an award, but there's not an obligation to make one if we don't feel that that stringent criteria has been met. And we might even wish to make a recommendation that somebody perhaps nominated for this role might perhaps instead be better suited to receiving a Good Neighbour Award, for example. That kind of thing might be what we want to do. I'd be reluctant to do something that limited at any one time that then meant, say, somebody who did make an extraordinary contribution couldn't be recognised for it.
So, Madam Chair, if I'm understanding Councillor Hopkins right, it's kind of turning it the other way around. So rather than saying a maximum of 2, it says you don't have to give any. But so I think I understand all that. So again, I can revise the wording and it can come to full council with revised wording to clarify these points.
I've got you, Pete. Duncan.
Yeah, I agree. It wants to be emphasised that it's extraordinary
Yeah.
and not just a run-of-the-mill thing that you've got to do. And I think that's very important. I also agree with Chloe that, I mean, for instance, well, you know, there could be something very, very dramatic happening in the town where 3 or 4 people at that time step up to the plate and do something quite dramatic. And I don't think it would be a good thing. I don't think it's necessary to restrict it to 2, but I think it is important that emphasis is put on extraordinary and not just, you've got to be careful, like with the pandemic, you can get carried away with the emotion of something happening. And, you know, there's got to be some, you know, something, as I say, extraordinary. It's got to be a big deal. We've got to realise it's a big deal and not just something that ticks a box for somebody.
Mm. If I may butt in there, I think the word longevity comes into it as well. It's not just a one-off. It's something that somebody has been doing for many, many years, constantly, and they've always been there. Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say what Duncan said. We don't really want to be tying our hands and limit it to 2. We've got to be flexible with that. A bit of discretion there, but also we've got to be mindful of the fact that it's got to be exceptional. It must be exceptional circumstances. Somebody or some people that's done something outstanding to benefit the town, indeed. And you know, I think at the end of the day, council will decide, come what may. That's what I'd just like to say.
Thank you, Chloe.
Just one last quick point. It seems to me that what's come out of our discussion is 2 keywords, which is exceptional and consistent. So perhaps that might be what we want to use to define what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I've written down all these notes. I understand what everyone's saying, and I can see how I can rephrase things and put emphasis on all these words, etc., etc. So what could happen now is council could just agree that the revised version goes to full council for final consideration. And what I might do, if there's time, is just, you know, run that section. It's only that section we're talking about. Run that section through when I've done the rewording. Run it through this committee, remote through email, in case any major objections. And then, so by the 25th of October, we'll have something solid.
And if you find it very difficult, you might give us 2 alternatives to choose from.
I shall use all the flowery language at my capacity hours.
2 alternatives, all or nothing.
I mean, it does. Personally, I think that it should be limited to 2 maximum per year. But I understand where Chloe's coming from. So perhaps you could say that the maximum number of new free men or free women is normally limited to 2, but in exceptional circumstances, more than 2 adults may be considered.
Can I just give you a scenario here, Chair? It may well be that we could look at the doctors that give vaccinations during the pandemic. No, that's just a classic example of what we could be faced with. How do we decide? I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but the doctors who vaccinated all the people in Beverley did outstanding work during the pandemic. Yeah.
But they don't, to me, they would not, the word consistent and exceptional doesn't come into it. It's just their job, and that's what they were doing.
It's their job, isn't it, doctors? That's what they pay to do.
Yes.
That doesn't fit anywhere in this criteria or eligibility. No. It's all about doing something exceptional and consistent over many years.
I think, Madam Chair, it's strengthening that language.
Yes.
And that purpose of the whole thing, with the words like consistency, longevity, extraordinary, exceptional, it's emphasising that side of it, because that's your toolkit to decide who would get it.
So I look forward to seeing your reviewed, your reviewed and renewed and enhanced version of this this policy. But I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, really, aren't we? We're all and of course we do look forward to November the 11th and the recognition of people who have gone the extra mile during the pandemic. And I have to say that not a single doctor was recommended for an award. Hopefully the nominations that did come forward are a good representation of how hard people in Beverley worked, and the commitment and the nod towards neighbourliness and community that we saw during the pandemic, because it was quite incredible. We've got some incredible nominations. We've got some amazing stories as well, and hopefully November the 11th award ceremony, you will all be there with your guests, and we will be able to celebrate the best of Beverley on that evening. It's now 7:31 and there is no